He thought he inherited a forgotten cabin, but his dog refused to step inside until it uncovered something buried for 50 years that someone was willing to kill for. Ethan Cole never wanted the cabin. It came with silence, dust, and a past he didn't understand. But the moment his dog Bruno stopped at the door, everything changed. Inside, the air felt wrong, like time had been holding its breath. And beneath the floor, something waited, sealed, hidden, and dangerous. What Ethan uncovers will force him to face not only his sister's secret, but the truth she died protecting. Before we begin, tell me, where are you watching from today? I'd love to know. The letter had arrived on a gray morning, the kind that made everything feel heavier than it should. Ethan Cole had been sitting at his small kitchen table, staring at a cup of coffee that had gone cold hours ago. He hadn't slept much the night before. He rarely did. The envelope was plain. No return address. Just his name typed neatly across the front. He almost didn't open it. But something about the weight of it, the way it sat there, silent and waiting, pulled at him. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a legal notice, and a name he hadn't said out loud in years. Lily Cole, his sister. Ethan read the line 3 times before it settled in his chest. Deceased. The word didn't feel real. It didn't fit the version of Lily he remembered. Restless, stubborn, always moving, always just out of reach. The kind of person who disappeared for months and came back like nothing had changed. But this time, she wasn't coming back. He leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly, and the paper trembling slightly in his hand. The room felt smaller all of a sudden, quieter. Then his eyes moved to the next line. Property transferred to next of kin. A cabin. Montana. Ethan let out a dry, humorless laugh. Of course, he muttered. A cabin in the middle of nowhere. That sounded like Lily. She'd always been drawn to places that most people avoided. He folded the paper carefully, more out of habit than intention, and set it on the table. Across the room, Bruno lifted his head. The German shepherd had been lying near the window, watching the world in that calm, steady way he always did. His ears twitched slightly, sensing the shift in Ethan's breathing, the tension settling into the air. Ethan looked at him. Bruno didn't move. He just watched. Looks like we're going on a trip, Ethan said quietly. Bruno stood up immediately. The drive took most of the day. The further they got from town, the narrower the roads became. Asphalt turned to gravel, gravel to dirt. The trees grew taller, denser, swallowing the sky until only thin strips of light broke through. Ethan drove with both hands tight on the wheel, his shoulders stiff. He hadn't been this far out in years. Not since he came back. The silence in the truck wasn't peaceful. It pressed in on him. Every sudden noise, the crunch of tires, the snap of a branch under the weight of the vehicle, sent small jolts through his body. His mind filled in the blanks before he could stop it. Movement, danger, incoming. He blinked hard, forcing himself back into the present. It's just the road, he muttered. Bruno sat in the passenger seat, alert but calm. Every now and then, the dog would glance at Ethan, as if checking in, making sure he was still there. Ethan reached over and rested a hand briefly on Bruno's neck. I'm fine, he said. Bruno didn't look convinced, but he settled. They found the cabin just before sunset. It stood at the edge of a clearing, surrounded by tall pines that swayed gently in the cold mountain wind. The structure itself was older than Ethan expected. 2 stories, weathered wood, a porch that sagged slightly on one side. It didn't look abandoned. That was the first thing that struck him. It looked untouched, like someone had walked away and never come back. Ethan turned off the engine. The sudden silence rang in his ears. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Bruno let out a low sound. Not a bark, not quite a growl. Something in between. Ethan frowned. What is it? Bruno was staring straight ahead, out at the cabin. His ears were upright, his body tense, every muscle locked in place. Ethan followed his gaze. The front door was closed. The windows were dark. No movement. No sound. Just a cabin in the middle of nowhere. Probably smells like dust, Ethan said, trying to keep his voice steady. He opened the truck door and stepped out. The air is colder than he expected, sharp and clean. It filled his lungs too quickly, making him cough once under his breath. Bruno didn't follow. Ethan turned. Hey! The dog remained in the seat, eyes fixed on the cabin. Bruno? Nothing. That wasn't like him. Bruno went everywhere with him, without hesitation, without question. Ethan walked around to the passenger side and opened the door. Come on. Bruno stepped down slowly this time, but the moment his paws touched the ground, he froze again, and his head lowered slightly. His ears stayed high, and that low, uneasy sound returned. Ethan felt it then. Not something he could see, not something he could hear, but something off. The kind of feeling he used to get overseas, right before things went bad, when the world looked normal, but his gut told him it wasn't. He straightened slightly, scanning the tree line. Nothing. Just wind moving through branches. Still, the feeling didn't go away. He turned back to the cabin. Let's just take a look, he said. They walked slowly across the clearing. The ground was uneven beneath his boots, patches of old grass and dirt shifting under each step. The porch creaked faintly as he stepped onto it. Bruno stopped at the bottom. Ethan looked back. The dog wasn't coming any further. Seriously? Ethan said softly. Bruno's eyes met his, but there was something in them Ethan had never seen before. Not fear, warning. Ethan hesitated. For a brief moment he considered turning around, getting back in the truck, driving away. But then he thought of the letter, of Lily, of all the years between them, and all the things left unsaid. He reached for the door. The handle was cold against his palm. For a second, his hand tightened, his breath catching slightly in his chest. His mind flickered. Old images, old sounds, things he tried not to remember. He pushed them down. This is different, he told himself quietly. He turned the handle. The door opened with a slow wooden creak. The air inside was still, not stale, not rotten, just still. Ethan stepped inside. The floorboards groaned softly beneath his weight. Behind him, Bruno remained at the threshold, watching, waiting. But Ethan glanced back once more. Come on, he said. But Bruno didn't move. He just stood there, ears high, eyes locked on the darkness beyond Ethan. Like he knew something Ethan didn't. And whatever it was, it had been waiting a long time. Ethan stood just inside the doorway, letting his eyes adjust to the dim interior. The light from outside stretched across the wooden floor in thin, pale strips, barely reaching the far corners of the room. It didn't smell abandoned. That was the first thing he noticed. No rot, no mildew, no sharp scent of decay. Instead, there was a faint trace of cedar and something dry, like a place that had been sealed, untouched, preserved. Ethan took a slow step forward. The floor creaked under his boot, the sound echoing more than it should have. It lingered in the air, stretching the silence instead of breaking it. Behind him, Bruno still hadn't moved. Ethan didn't need to turn to know. He could feel it. The dog's hesitation pressed against his back like a warning he couldn't ignore. "It's fine," Ethan said quietly, though he wasn't sure who he was trying to convince. He stepped further inside. The main room was simple. A worn couch, a wooden table, a rocking chair angled toward a window that looked out into the trees. Dust rested lightly on the surfaces, but not enough to suggest years of neglect. It looked paused, as if someone had been living here, and then just stopped. Ethan moved toward the table. His fingers brushed across the surface, leaving a faint trail through the dust. Not thick, not untouched for decades. He frowned. "That doesn't make sense," he muttered, and a gust of wind brushed against the cabin, rattling one of the windows. Ethan flinched. Not visibly, not in a way most people would notice, but his shoulders tightened. His breath shortened. His eyes snapped toward the sound instantly, scanning for movement, for threats, for anything out of place. Nothing. Just wind. He exhaled slowly, forcing his body to ease. "Just the wind," he whispered. But his pulse didn't settle. It rarely did. He moved through the room, each step measured, controlled. Years of training didn't fade. They settled into the bones, into the way he held himself, the way he scanned corners before turning his back. The kitchen sat just beyond the main room. Small, neat. A few dishes stacked beside the sink, a kettle resting on the stove. Ethan paused. That wasn't right. He stepped closer. While the dishes were clean, not recently washed, but not left dirty either. The kettle had a thin layer of dust, but it hadn't been disturbed. It was like someone had left in the middle of an ordinary day and never returned. "Lily," he said under his breath. The name felt strange in the room. Too loud, too present. He hadn't said it in years. Ethan turned slowly, looking back toward the front door. Bruno was still there, standing in the same place, watching. "Come on," Ethan said again, softer this time. Bruno took one step forward, then stopped, his head tilted slightly, his gaze shifting, not to Ethan, but downward, toward the floor. Ethan followed his line of sight, the wooden boards beneath his feet, still, silent. Nothing unusual. Ethan straightened. There's nothing there. But Bruno didn't move, yet the dog let out a low growl, not loud, not aggressive, just enough to make the air feel tighter. Ethan felt it again, that sensation, the one that didn't belong to sight or sound, the one that lived somewhere deeper. He turned away from it. "I'm not doing this," he muttered. He walked past the main room, heading toward the staircase. The wood groaned faintly under his weight as he climbed. Each step echoed behind him, too loud, too clear. Halfway up, he stopped. There it was again. A sound, soft, barely there, like something shifting or settling. Ethan held still, listening. Nothing. He shook his head once, sharp and dismissive. "You're hearing things," he said quietly. It wasn't the first time. Back home, he heard things too. At night, in the quiet, sounds that weren't there, had memories that didn't stay where they belonged. He reached the top of the stairs. The hallway stretched out in front of him, narrow and dim, 2 doors on either side, one slightly open. Ethan pushed the first door gently. A bedroom. Simple. Clean. A bed neatly made. A dresser against the wall. A window letting in just enough light to see the faint outline of dust in the air. He stepped inside. His eyes moved slowly across the room. Nothing out of place, but something felt off. Not wrong, just incomplete. Like a sentence that had been cut off before it ended. Ethan turned toward the second room. This one was smaller, bare, almost empty. Just a single chair near the window. He stepped closer. The floor creaked again, and this time, he heard it clearly. A faint sound. Below him. Not in the room. Not outside. On underneath. Ethan froze. His breath caught for just a second. Then his jaw tightened. "No," he said under his breath. He stood there, listening. The silence returned. Heavy. Pressing. Like it was waiting for him to react. Ethan shook his head again, more forcefully this time. "Not real," he said. But his voice didn't carry much conviction. He turned and walked back toward the stairs. Each step down felt slower, more deliberate. As he reached the bottom, Bruno was no longer at the door. The dog stood in the center of the room now. Still, rigid, his eyes locked on the floor beneath the staircase. Ethan stopped. Bruno let out another low growl. Then, slowly, deliberately, he took a step forward and lowered his head, right above the wooden boards. Ethan's chest tightened. "What is it?" he asked quietly. Bruno didn't respond. He didn't look away. He just stared at the floor, like something beneath it was staring back. Ethan didn't move. For a long second, the room held its breath. Bruno's body was rigid, every muscle drawn tight. His ears were forward, his eyes locked on a single point beneath the staircase. The low growl in his chest deepened, vibrating through the silence. Ethan swallowed. "What do you hear?" he asked quietly. Bruno didn't answer. He never did. But Ethan trusted him more than he trusted himself. Slowly, Ethan stepped closer. The wooden floor looked no different from the rest. Same aged planks, same faint dust. No marks, no cracks, nothing that suggested anything hidden beneath. And yet, Ethan crouched down. The air felt colder here. Not by much, but enough. He placed his hand flat against the floor. Still, solid, nothing. Ethan let out a slow breath through his nose. "There's nothing there, buddy." Bruno's growl sharpened. Then, without warning, he lunged forward. His claws scraped hard against the wood, a sudden, violent sound that shattered the silence. Ethan flinched. "Hey!" he snapped, instinct kicking in. Bruno didn't stop. He dug at the floor with urgency, paws striking again and again in the same spot. The sound echoed through the cabin, sharp, frantic, relentless. "Bruno!" Ethan grabbed for him, catching the dog by the collar. "Stop!" Bruno resisted, not aggressively, but with force. His body leaned forward, fighting the hold, desperate to get back to the floor. Ethan tightened his grip. "That's enough!" For a moment, it felt like he was back there again. Different place, different time. Same tension, that same sudden surge of adrenaline. His breathing quickened. His vision narrowed slightly, the edges of the room dimming as his focus locked in too hard, too fast. Bruno's claws scraped again. Ethan snapped. "Stop it!" The word came out sharper than he intended. Bruno froze. The room went quiet. Too quiet. Ethan's chest rose and fell unevenly. He kept his hand on the dog's collar, holding him in place, feeling the steady heat of his body, the controlled strength beneath his fur. Bruno slowly turned his head. Their eyes met. There was no fear in the dog's expression, no confusion, just something steady, certain. Ethan's grip loosened. "Okay," he said, softer now. Bruno didn't move right away. He watched Ethan for a moment longer. Then, carefully, he lowered his head again. But this time, he didn't dig. He listened, and Ethan shifted his weight, kneeling beside him. The floor felt colder now, Or maybe that was just his hands. He leaned closer, and for a moment, he heard it. Faint. So faint he almost missed it. A soft sound. Not scratching. Not movement. More like settling. Like something deep below the wood, adjusting after a long time. Ethan pulled back slightly, his jaw tightening. "You heard that too," he murmured. Bruno's ears flicked. That was enough. Ethan stood up slowly, his mind already moving ahead. This wasn't nothing. It wasn't just his head, and Bruno wasn't wrong. He looked around the cabin, scanning the walls, the corners, the structure. His training slipped back into place without effort. Assess, observe, break it down. The staircase, the space beneath it, too clean, too smooth. He stepped back, and giving himself a wider view. Then he saw it. A slight difference in the grain of the wood, barely noticeable. But there, a seam. Ethan crouched again, brushing his fingers across the boards. The line was subtle, hidden in the pattern, but once you saw it, you couldn't unsee it. "This wasn't built like the rest," he said quietly. Bruno shifted beside him, watching. Ethan pressed down on one of the planks. Nothing. He tried another. Still nothing. Then he ran his fingers along the edge of the seam until he felt it. A small indentation, worn smooth with time, like something that had been touched, again and again, long ago. Ethan hesitated. His hand hovered there. For a second, his mind drifted. A different door, a different place. The memory came fast, too fast. His heart kicked harder in his chest. He blinked, grounding himself. "This is different," he said under his breath. He pressed. The board shifted, just slightly, but enough. Bruno stiffened immediately. Ethan pulled his hand back. The silence returned, heavier than before. Neither of them moved. Then Bruno stepped forward again. This time he didn't dig. He simply placed his paw gently on the board and looked up at Ethan, waiting. Ethan exhaled slowly. "All right," he said. He reached down again. This time he didn't hesitate. He pressed harder. The wood gave with a low, hollow sound. A dull click followed. Something inside the structure shifted. Ethan froze. The sound echoed softly beneath the floor. Then, stillness. He looked at Bruno. The dog's eyes were fixed on the same spot, unblinking. Ethan swallowed. "This isn't just a floor," he said quietly, but he slid his fingers beneath the edge of the loosened plank. The wood was cold. He tightened his grip and began to lift. Slowly, carefully. As the board rose, a thin line of darkness opened beneath it. Cold air slipped through. Dry, old, untouched. Ethan's breath slowed. His pulse didn't. The gap widened just enough for him to see. Not the bottom. Just shadow, deep, still, waiting. Bruno stepped closer, his body now between Ethan and the opening. Protective, alert. Ethan didn't push further. Not yet. He let the board settle back into place. The soft thud echoed quietly. The cabin returned to silence. But it wasn't the same silence anymore. Now it felt awake. Ethan sat back on his heels. His eyes stayed on the floor. "There's something down there," he said. Not a question, a fact. While Bruno lay down beside the spot, he didn't relax. He didn't look away. He simply stayed, guarding it, like whatever was beneath the floor wasn't meant to be left alone. Ethan didn't sleep much that night. He stretched out on the old couch with his boots still on, one arm resting across his chest, the other within reach of the small flashlight he kept beside him. The cabin stayed quiet, but not in a way that brought comfort. It was the kind of quiet that listened back. Every small sound seemed to carry further than it should. The wind brushing the outer walls, the soft shift of wood as the temperature dropped. Once, sometime after midnight, a faint creak echoed from beneath the floor. Ethan's eyes opened instantly, wide, alert. His body tensed before his mind caught up. He didn't move, didn't breathe too loudly, just listened. Nothing followed. The silence returned, pressing down again. Across the room, Bruno was already awake. The dog lay near the base of the stairs, exactly where he had settled earlier. His head was up, eyes fixed on the same spot on the floor. He hadn't moved all night. Ethan pushed himself up slowly, sitting on the edge of the couch. His muscles ached, not from physical strain, but from the kind of tension that never fully left him. "How long you been watching that?" he asked quietly. Bruno didn't look at him. Ethan nodded once as if that answered something. "Yeah," he murmured. "Me too." Morning came slowly. A pale gray light slipped through the windows, softening the edges of the room, but not lifting the weight inside it. Ethan stood over the floor beneath the staircase and staring down at the seam in the wood. It didn't look like much, just a faint line. But now that he knew it was there, it felt impossible to ignore. Bruno stood beside him, silent, focused. "You're not letting this go, are you?" Ethan said. Bruno's ears twitched. That was answer enough. Ethan exhaled, running a hand over the back of his neck. "All right." He moved to the kitchen and searched through the drawers. It didn't take long to find what he needed: a worn screwdriver, a rusted pry bar tucked behind a stack of old tools. He brought them back and crouched down. For a moment he hesitated. His fingers rested lightly against the wood. There was a familiar feeling creeping in again. That edge, that quiet warning, the kind that had kept him alive once. But this wasn't that place. This wasn't that time. Yet he pushed the thought away. "Let's see what you've been guarding," he said. He slid the edge of the pry bar into the seam and applied pressure. The wood resisted at first. Then, a sharp crack. The plank lifted slightly, breaking the illusion of a solid floor. Bruno stepped closer immediately, his body angled protectively. Ethan worked the bar deeper, prying slowly, carefully. Another crack. The board loosened. Dust drifted up from the edges, catching the morning light. The smell hit him next. Dry. Old. Like air that hadn't moved in decades. Ethan pulled the plank free and set it aside. Beneath it was darkness. A square opening, just large enough to see into, but not enough to understand what lay below. Cold air seeped upward. Not a breeze, just a steady presence. Ethan leaned closer, unshining his flashlight into the gap. The beam cut through the dark, revealing the top of something. Wood. Flat. Structured. Not dirt. Not empty space. Something built. Ethan's jaw tightened. "This wasn't storage," he said quietly. Bruno let out a low sound. Ethan reached down and widened the opening, pulling back another board, then another. Each piece came loose easier than the last, as if the structure had been waiting to be uncovered. Soon the shape became clear. A hatch, hidden beneath the floor. Perfectly fitted. Almost invisible. Ethan brushed his hand across it, clearing away dust. The edges were smooth, the hinges concealed. A small metal ring sat flush against the surface. His fingers hovered over it. He could feel his pulse again. Louder now, faster. He glanced at Bruno. The dog was standing stiff, his eyes fixed on the hatch. Not afraid. focused. Ready. Ethan wrapped his fingers around the metal ring. Cold. He pulled. The hatch didn't move. He adjusted his grip, pulling harder. This time, it gave. Slowly, reluctantly, with a deep, hollow sound as the seal broke. The hatch lifted just enough for a rush of stale air to escape. Ethan leaned back slightly, letting it pass. Then he lifted it further. The darkness below opened up, wider now, deeper. A narrow set of wooden steps descended into the ground, disappearing into shadow. Ethan stared down. The beam of his flashlight reached only part way. The rest remained hidden, waiting. He felt it again. That pull, not curiosity, something heavier, like standing at the edge of something you couldn't take back once you stepped into it. Bruno moved forward, shun without hesitation. He stepped between Ethan and the opening, his body blocking the path. Ethan blinked. "Hey," he said softly. Bruno didn't move. He stood there, guarding the entrance, not from what was inside, from letting Ethan go down. Ethan let out a quiet breath. "You think it's not safe?" Bruno's ears flicked slightly. Ethan nodded slowly. "Yeah," he said. "I got that feeling too." He looked back down into the darkness. The stairs waited, unchanged, unmoving, as if time had stopped below. Ethan lowered the hatch partway, not closing it fully, just enough to break the direct line into the dark. "Not today," he said. Bruno finally relaxed, just a fraction. Ethan stood, stepping back from the opening, but even as he turned away, he could feel it, that presence, that quiet weight beneath the floor. No, it wasn't gone. It hadn't changed. If anything, it felt closer now. Like opening the door hadn't disturbed it. It had woken it. And whatever was down there, it knew they were here. Ethan stood in the middle of the cabin, staring at the half-closed hatch beneath the staircase. The room felt different now. Not quieter, not louder, just aware. Like the cabin had shifted from being empty to being occupied. He rubbed a hand over his face, dragging himself back into the moment. "You're getting ahead of yourself," he muttered. But his eyes drifted back to the hatch. He hadn't gone down. Not yet. But that didn't mean he wasn't going to. Bruno remained close, pacing slowly in a tight circle near the stairs. Not restless, controlled, watching, listening, waiting. Ethan glanced at him. "You're not letting this go either, huh?" Bruno stopped and looked at him. Steady, certain. Ethan nodded once. "Yeah," he said. "Me neither." It took him an hour to prepare, not because he needed the time, because he needed the distance. He stepped outside, breathing in the cold mountain air, letting it clear his head. The trees swayed gently in the wind, their branches whispering in a language that felt older than anything inside that cabin. The clearing looked peaceful, too peaceful. Ethan scanned the tree line automatically. Left, right, high ground, shadows. Nothing moved. Still, the feeling didn't leave him. He walked the perimeter once, boots crunching softly against the dirt and patches of frost. No tracks, no signs of disturbance, nothing that shouldn't be there. That should have made him feel better. It didn't. When he stepped back onto the porch, Bruno was already waiting by the door. Ethan paused. "You're coming down with me," he said. Bruno didn't hesitate this time. Inside, the hatch waited exactly where he left it. Ethan crouched down and pulled it open fully. The darkness below didn't shift, didn't react. It simply remained. Still. He flicked on his flashlight and aimed it downward. The beam revealed more than before. Wooden steps, narrow, steep, worn. Not from recent use, but not untouched either. Ethan tightened his grip on the flashlight. "Stay close," he said. Bruno stepped ahead of him. Of course he did. Ethan exhaled once and followed. The first step creaked under his weight. The sound echoed too far, too deep. Ethan paused, listening. Nothing answered. He continued. Step by step, the light from above faded, replaced by the tight, focused beam of the flashlight. The air grew colder the further he descended, heavier with that same dry, sealed scent. It wasn't unpleasant. It was preserved, like something that had been kept exactly the way it was left. Bruno reached the bottom first. He didn't move forward. He stood at the last step, body tense, waiting. Ethan joined him. The room was small, maybe 6 feet across. Low ceiling. Packed earth walls reinforced with old wooden beams. And in the center, the trunk. Ethan's breath slowed. It was larger than he expected. Solid. Old. Reinforced with dark metal bands that had dulled with age. The surface was scratched, worn, but intact. Not rotted. Not broken. Maintained. Ethan stepped closer. Each footstep sounded louder than it should. Bruno followed at his side now, not ahead, watching everything. The trunk sat unmoving, silent, like it had been waiting for someone to come back. Ethan crouched beside it. The metal latch was still in place, locked. He ran his fingers across it. Cold, heavy. "This isn't just storage," he said quietly. Bruno let out a low breath. Ethan leaned back slightly, scanning the rest of the room. Nothing else. No tools, no shelves, no clutter. Just the trunk. That meant something. Whatever this was, it mattered. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the small set of tools he'd brought down. The metal clicked softly in his hand. For a moment he didn't move. His eyes stayed on the lock. And just for a second, the memory came back. A different room, a different container, a different kind of silence. He blinked hard, pushed it down. "This is different," he said again. He set the tool against the lock, applied pressure. The metal resisted. Then, a sharp snap. The lock broke. The sound echoed through the small space louder than anything before. Ethan froze. His head tilted slightly, listening. Nothing followed. But Bruno stiffened. Ethan glanced at him. "What is it?" Bruno's gaze had shifted. Not to the trunk, not to the stairs, toward the cabin above. Ethan's chest tightened. "You hear something?" Bruno didn't respond. He just listened. Ethan held still. Seconds passed. Nothing. No footsteps. No movement. Just silence. Bruno slowly relaxed. Ethan let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. "Stay focused," he said quietly. He turned back to the trunk. The broken lock hung loosely now. As Ethan reached forward, lifted the lid, it opened slowly, with a deep, hollow creak. The smell hit him first. Not decay. Paper. Old fabric. Time. Ethan shined the flashlight inside. Layers. Carefully packed. Cloth. Folded. Preserved. He reached in, pulling back the top layer. Beneath it, money. Stacks of old bills wrapped tightly, edges yellowed but intact. Ethan stared. "That's a lot," he said under his breath. He shifted the light. More layers. Letters. bundles tied with string, photos, black and white, faces frozen in time. He picked one up. His fingers tightened slightly. Lily, younger, smiling, standing beside a man Ethan had never seen before. Ethan's jaw clenched. "Who are you?" he murmured. Bruno suddenly growled, louder this time. Ethan's head snapped up. "What?" Bruno wasn't looking at the trunk anymore. He was staring at the stairs, his body rigid, ears forward, that low, dangerous sound building again. Ethan turned slowly, the staircase leading back up into the cabin. Dark. Still. But now, different. Ethan felt it instantly. That shift, that presence. Someone was there, above them, watching. Ethan's grip tightened around the flashlight. His voice dropped. "Bruno." The dog didn't look away, didn't move, just stood there. Ready. Ethan rose slowly to his feet. The trunk remained open behind him. The money, the letters, the truth, all exposed. But none of it mattered now, because whatever had been sealed for 50 years wasn't the only thing that had been waiting. And they weren't alone anymore. Ethan didn't rush. Well, that was the first thing that saved him. Every instinct in his body told him to move fast. Get up the stairs, clear the room, find the threat. But that instinct came from a different place, a different life. And that life had taught him something else, too. Speed got you killed. He lifted his hand slowly, signaling Bruno to stay. The dog didn't hesitate. He froze in place, muscles coiled but controlled, eyes locked on the staircase. Ethan reached for the edge of the hatch and pulled it halfway down, leaving just enough space to see through. Darkness filled the opening above. No movement. No sound. But the feeling was there. Heavy. Close. Ethan leaned in slightly, angling his body to keep most of himself hidden below the floor level. He listened. A faint shift. Soft. Careful. Not the random noise of a house settling. Now intentional. Someone was moving. Ethan's jaw tightened. His breathing slowed, steadying itself. He counted the seconds. 1, 2, 3. Nothing. Then, a creak. Right above the hatch. Ethan's hand clenched into a fist. Too close. Whoever it was, they were standing right over the opening. Bruno let out the smallest sound, a low warning deep in his throat. Ethan shook his head slightly. Not yet. The creak came again, then footsteps, slow, measured, moving away. Ethan waited. He didn't move until the silence returned. Even then, he gave it another full minute. Then 2. Only when the cabin above settled back into that unnatural stillness did he move again. He pushed the hatch open carefully, inch by inch. No sudden motion, no noise. He raised himself just enough to see. The main room was empty, while the door was still closed, the windows unchanged. But something was different. Ethan pulled himself up and stepped out of the hidden space. Bruno followed immediately, staying close to his side. Ethan scanned the room. Everything looked the same, but the air didn't feel the same. It felt disturbed. He moved toward the door, each step slow, controlled. He reached for the handle, paused, listened. Nothing. He opened it. The cold air hit him instantly. Sharp, clean, real. Ethan stepped outside. Bruno moved ahead this time, not hesitant anymore. focused. Ethan's eyes dropped to the ground, and there it was. Tracks. Fresh. Pressed into the thin layer of snow that had settled overnight. Boot prints. Not his. Not from yesterday. New. Ethan crouched down, studying them. Deep. Heavy. One person. Maybe more. But he followed the line with his eyes. They came from the tree line, crossed the clearing, stopped at the porch, then turned, back toward the woods. Ethan's chest tightened. "They were here," he said quietly. Bruno sniffed the ground, then lifted his head, staring toward the forest. His ears were sharp again, alert. Ethan stood slowly. His body shifted. Not tense. Not panicked. Focused. The way it used to be, before things went wrong. He scanned the trees, the shadows, the spaces between. Nothing moved. But he knew better than to trust that. "They're watching," he murmured. Bruno didn't look away. Ethan exhaled slowly, his mind already working through it. Who? Why? The trunk? The money? The letters? Someone knew or had known. And now? They were back. Ethan turned and walked back into the cabin, closing the door behind him. The warmth inside didn't reach him. Not anymore. He moved straight to the table and set the flashlight down. His hands were steady now, calmer than before. Not because things were better, because they were clear. He reached into his jacket and pulled out one of the bundles from the trunk. A stack of letters, tied together, old, carefully preserved. He hesitated, then untied the string. The paper inside was yellowed but intact. He unfolded the first one. The handwriting wasn't Lily's. It was sharper, more controlled, masculine. Ethan read silently, his eyes moving slowly across the page. Then again, this time out loud. "My dearest Lily, I'm sending another portion. Keep it safe. Trust no one, not even your brother. If anything happens, you must not speak of this." Ethan stopped, and his throat tightened slightly. "Not even your brother." He stared at the words. Something shifted inside him. Not anger. Not yet. Something quieter. He picked up the next letter. Similar tone, similar urgency. Mentions of places, times, things half hidden in code. Then another, and another. Each one pointing to something bigger, something dangerous. Ethan set the letters down slowly. "This wasn't about money," he said. Bruno looked at him. Ethan nodded once. She was hiding someone. The realization settled into the room. Heavy, real. Ethan ran a hand through his hair. "Lily, what did you get into?" Bruno moved closer, resting against his leg. Ethan glanced down at him. For a moment his expression softened. "Guess we're not leaving," he said quietly. Bruno didn't react. He didn't need to, as Ethan already knew. He looked back toward the hatch, still open, still waiting. Then toward the door, toward the tracks leading back into the trees. Two directions, one past, one present, both connected. Ethan picked up the letters again. This time his hands didn't hesitate. "All right," he said. "Let's find out the truth." Outside, the wind moved through the forest again. Soft, endless, and somewhere beyond the trees, something shifted. Watching. Waiting. For him to come closer. Ethan didn't move right away. He stood in the doorway, looking out at the forest, the letters still in his hand. The wind pushed gently through the trees, carrying that same low whisper across the clearing. It sounded peaceful. It wasn't. He stepped back inside and shut the door firmly, sliding the deadbolt into place. The soft click echoed louder than it should have. Bruno turned immediately, taking position near the window, watching the tree line without blinking. Ethan walked to the table and spread the letters out in front of him. One by one, carefully, like pieces of something that had been taken apart and hidden on purpose. He picked up the first letter again. My dearest Lily. The words felt heavier now. He read slower this time, looking for patterns, connections, anything that made sense. Another portion. Keep it safe. They're asking questions. I don't know how much longer. Ethan's eyes narrowed. They, he said under his breath. Not a single person. A group. The next letter mentioned a lake, a meeting, a transfer. Another one referenced a time. Midnight. No lights. Ethan leaned back slightly, yet his mind working through it. This wasn't random, he said quietly. This was organized. Bruno shifted near the window, his ears twitching, but he didn't move away from his post. Ethan reached for one of the photographs, the one he'd pulled from the trunk earlier. Lily stood beside the man. Younger, carefree, her arm lightly touching his. The man looked different from anyone Ethan remembered her being around. Dark hair, sharp features. Not smiling, but not cold either. Focused. Ethan studied the image. You trusted him, he murmured. His fingers tightened slightly on the edge of the photo. Why? He set it down and reached into the trunk again, pulling out more of the contents. Beneath the money, beneath the letters. There was something else, a small notebook, worn, leather-bound. Ethan paused. Something about it felt different, more personal. He opened it slowly. The first page was blank. The second. His breath caught. It was Lily's handwriting. He would have recognized it anywhere, even after all these years. He sat down. Bruno remained at the window. Ethan began to read. If you're reading this, it means I'm gone. The words settled deep. He swallowed, kept going. I never wanted you to find this place. Not like this. But if you did, then maybe it's time. Ethan's grip tightened slightly on the edge of the page. You always deserved the truth. I just didn't know how to give it to you without putting you in danger. He exhaled slowly. Danger. The word echoed. Not just emotional, real. He turned the page. I met him in 1968. His name is Daniel. He never told me his last name. Said it was safer that way. Ethan leaned forward, listening now, not just reading. He was running, not from the law, from something worse. I didn't understand it at first. I thought he was just scared. But then I started seeing things. Men watching, cars that didn't belong, questions that weren't really questions. Ethan's eyes flicked toward the window. Bruno was still watching, still alert. Ethan returned to the page. He asked me to hold something for him. Just for a few days, he said. Money, documents. I said yes before I understood what I was agreeing to. Ethan let out a slow breath. That sounds like you, he whispered. He turned the page again. It wasn't just money. It was everything he knew. Names, places, things people would kill to keep hidden. But he said if anything happened to him, I had to keep it safe. Ethan's jaw tightened. That's why, he said quietly. Not wealth, not inheritance, responsibility. He kept reading. I should have walked away. I should have told someone. But I didn't. I stayed. Because I loved him. And because I thought I could fix it. Ethan's expression shifted. Softer. Sad. You always tried to fix things, he murmured. Another page. They came looking for him. More than once, I told them he was gone. That I didn't know anything. I lied. Every time. Ethan felt something tighten in his chest. A slow understanding forming. He wasn't just hiding, Ethan said. He was being hunted. Bruno turned his head slightly, as if reacting to the tone in Ethan's voice. Ethan didn't notice. He was already turning the next page. He wanted to leave and start over somewhere far away. But it was too late. Once you know certain things, you don't get to walk away. Ethan's fingers stilled. That line stayed with him. He read it again, then again. You don't get to walk away. He looked down at his hands, at the faint scars, at the weight that never quite left him. No, he said quietly. You don't. He continued. The last time I saw him, he told me if anything happened, I had to disappear, not just from them, from everyone. Even you. Ethan closed his eyes for a moment. Even you. The distance, the silence, all those years. It wasn't random. It wasn't indifference. It was choice. A painful one. He opened his eyes and turned the page. The handwriting changed slightly. Less steady. More rushed. I think they're getting closer. I hear things at night. So sometimes I think I see someone in the trees. But no one ever comes to the door. Ethan's head lifted slowly. His eyes moved toward the window. Bruno was already staring out into the forest. Ethan's chest tightened. She stayed, he said. She didn't run. He looked back at the page. I built the room under the stairs myself. Took weeks. I needed somewhere no one would look. Somewhere safe. Ethan glanced toward the hatch. Now open, now exposed. It worked, he whispered. For a while. He turned the final page. I never told you any of this because I didn't want you pulled into it. You've already seen enough. You don't need more ghosts. Ethan's breath slowed. Too late. He read the last line. If you found this, then I'm sorry. And I hope you understand. The words sat there. Simple. Heavy. And Ethan closed the notebook slowly. The room felt different now. Not just tense. Not just uncertain. Connected. Lily hadn't left him. She had protected him. In the only way she knew how. Ethan leaned back in the chair, staring at the ceiling. You should have told me, he said quietly. His voice didn't carry anger, just regret. Bruno walked over and sat beside him, close. Ethan rested a hand on his head absent-mindedly. She was trying to keep me out of it, he said. Bruno didn't respond, but he stayed. That was enough. Ethan sat there for a long time. The letters, the photos, the notebook, all of it forming a picture he had never seen before, a life he had never understood. Then, Bruno stiffened. Ethan's hand paused. What is it? The dog turned sharply toward the door. Not the window this time. The door, as Ethan followed his gaze. The silence shifted again. Subtle, but unmistakable. A sound. Outside. Footsteps. Soft. Careful. Coming back, Ethan stood slowly. The past wasn't the only thing closing in, and whatever had been waiting out there was done watching. Ethan didn't speak. He didn't need to. The shift in the air said everything. Bruno's body had already changed. No hesitation now, no uncertainty. His stance was low, controlled, ready. His eyes locked on the door like he could see through it. Ethan moved without thinking, not panic, training. He stepped away from the table, scanning the room in a single sweep. Entry points, lines of sight, cover, the windows, too exposed. The door, too direct. The hallway, narrow, better. He lowered his voice. Back. Bruno moved instantly, stepping with him as Ethan repositioned toward the side wall, just out of direct view from the door. The footsteps outside stopped, right at the porch. Ethan's pulse slowed instead of rising. That was always the strange part. When things got real, everything inside him quieted. He listened. No voices, no sudden movement, just presence. Then, a faint shift, wood creaking under weight. Someone was on the porch. Bruno's ears twitched. Ethan's jaw tightened. A shadow moved across the thin strip of light beneath the door. Ethan's fingers curled slightly, ready. Then, a soft knock, 3 taps, slow, deliberate. Ethan didn't answer. The knock came again. Softer this time, almost polite. "Anyone inside?" a voice called out. Male, calm, controlled, too controlled. Ethan stayed still. Bruno didn't move, and silence stretched. Then the voice again. "We're not here to cause trouble." Ethan almost smiled. Almost. He leaned slightly, just enough to catch the edge of the window without exposing himself. A figure stood on the porch. Dark jacket. Hat pulled low. Another shape behind him. 2 at least. Ethan pulled back. "They know," he whispered. Bruno's growl deepened. Low, steady. The man outside shifted his weight. "You've got something that doesn't belong to you," he said, louder now. "We'd rather settle this the easy way." Ethan's eyes flicked toward the open hatch, toward the trunk, toward everything Lily had hidden. "This doesn't end easy," Ethan murmured. The porch creaked again. A second voice this time. "Doors locked." Ethan exhaled slowly. He had seconds, maybe less. "Stay close," he said, when Bruno moved tighter against him. Ethan stepped back further into the shadowed part of the room. Then, the handle turned, hard. Once, twice, then a sharp jolt against the door. Wood rattled. Bruno barked once, sharp, explosive. "Back!" Ethan snapped. The second impact hit harder. The frame groaned. Ethan's breathing stayed even, controlled, focused. He shifted his position again, angling himself toward the side. Another hit. The door cracked. A splinter of wood broke loose near the frame. "Last chance," the voice called. Ethan didn't answer. The next impact came with full force. The door burst inward, wood split, light flooded the room, and for a brief second, everything moved at once. Bruno lunged first, a blur of muscle and motion. He hit the lead man mid-step, knocking him off balance before he could fully enter. The man stumbled back, shouting. The second man raised something. Ethan moved. Fast, direct. He grabbed the edge of the broken door and slammed it sideways, forcing space between them. "Get down!" he shouted. Bruno twisted away just in time. A loud crack filled the air. The sound echoed sharp and sudden. Wood splintered near the wall. Ethan dropped low, pulling Bruno with him behind the partial cover of the hallway. "Stay with me," he said. Bruno pressed close, his body tense but responsive. The men outside shifted position, boots against wood, controlled, not reckless. That told Ethan everything he needed to know. They weren't amateurs. They weren't scared. They were here for something specific, and they weren't leaving without it. Ethan's mind raced. Angles, what movement, timing. He glanced toward the window. Too open. The back exit. Possible, but exposed. The hatch. No. Too slow. Another sound. Movement near the side wall. Ethan reacted instantly. Down! Bruno dropped as Ethan pulled him tight against the ground. A second sharp crack echoed. Something struck the wall above them. Close. Too close. Bruno let out a short, pained sound. Ethan's head snapped down. Hey! The dog was still moving, still alert. But there was a thin line of red along his side. Ethan's chest tightened. Stay with me, he said, quieter now. Bruno didn't hesitate. He stayed, even injured, even shaken. Still focused, still ready. Ethan's expression hardened. Not happening, he muttered. The voices outside shifted again. They're inside. Move around. Ethan's grip tightened. Oh, they were spreading, cutting off exits. He glanced at Bruno. The dog met his eyes. No fear, no hesitation, just trust. Ethan nodded once. All right, he said. His voice was calm, steady, different now. Let's finish this. Outside, the wind moved through the trees again, but it wasn't the only thing moving anymore, because the past had finally caught up, and this time, it wasn't hiding. Ethan didn't wait for them to move first. He couldn't. Not with Bruno hurt, not with the cabin exposed. He shifted his weight, pulling Bruno with him toward the back of the room, away from the broken doorway. Every step was calculated, controlled, the way it used to be when hesitation meant everything fell apart. Stay close, he whispered. Bruno moved beside him, slower now, but still steady. The line of blood along his side was thin, but it was there. Real. Ethan felt it like a pressure in his chest. Not fear, not panic, something sharper, something focused. He crouched near the edge of the hallway, listening. The men outside were spreading out. One moved along the side wall. The other circled wider, boots crunching faintly against the ground. They weren't rushing anymore. They were hunting. Ethan glanced toward the open hatch beneath the stairs, then back to Bruno, then to the door. 3 directions, 1 choice. He leaned closer to Bruno. We're going down, he said quietly. Bruno didn't hesitate, even injured, even tired. He followed. Ethan moved fast but silent, pulling the hatch open fully and guiding Bruno down first. The dog descended carefully, each step measured, yet his breathing steady despite the pain. Ethan followed, pulling the hatch down behind them just enough to cover the opening without sealing it completely. The darkness swallowed them again, but this time, it didn't feel unknown. It felt necessary. Ethan clicked on the flashlight, keeping the beam low. Stay here, he whispered. Bruno stayed close anyway. The small room felt tighter now, the air heavier with everything that had already been uncovered. The trunk still sat open. Money, letters, photos. But none of that mattered anymore. Ethan moved past it, his eyes scanning the floor, the walls, looking for something else. Something he had missed. Bruno shifted suddenly, not toward the stairs, toward the far wall. Ethan followed his gaze. The packed earth looked undisturbed, but Bruno didn't bark, didn't growl. He moved forward slowly, lowered his head, and began to sniff. Focused, intent. Ethan stepped closer. "What is it?" he whispered. Bruno's paw touched the ground once. Then again. Not digging. Marking. Ethan crouched beside him. The dirt looked the same as everything else, but when he pressed his hand against it, it gave. Slightly. Ethan's breath slowed. "This wasn't always solid," he murmured. Bruno stepped back, giving him space. Ethan reached for the small tool still tucked into his pocket. He pressed it into the soil. The surface cracked, dry, old. He dug carefully, pulling back layers of packed earth. The smell rose first. Not decay, not fresh, something older, still preserved. Ethan worked faster now, his hands steady, focused. The dirt gave way inch by inch. Then, the tool struck something, hard. Ethan froze. Bruno stiffened beside him. Ethan brushed the soil away slowly. Wood, flat, smooth, not part of the wall, placed there. He cleared more. The shape formed, a narrow box, buried, hidden. Ethan sat back slightly, his chest tightening. "This is it," he said quietly. Bruno didn't move. He watched. Ethan reached forward and gripped the edge. The wood shifted easily, too easily, like it had been waiting to be uncovered. He pulled it free, set it down carefully. For a moment he didn't open it. His hand rested on top. The weight of it felt different from the trunk. Heavier. Not physically. Something else. He lifted the lid. Inside. Fabric. Wrapped tightly. Ethan peeled it back slowly. And then, he stopped. His breath caught. Not sharp, not sudden, just gone. Bruno let out a low sound, while Ethan stared. The shape inside was unmistakable, human, still, preserved by time and earth. The bones lay where they had been placed decades ago, carefully, not discarded, not hidden in panic, buried with intention. Ethan's throat tightened. "Daniel," he whispered. The name felt right. He didn't know how, but he knew. He sat back slowly, his eyes still locked on what lay before him. The letters, the photos, the journal, everything lined up now. Lily hadn't just helped him. She had stayed. She had watched. She had buried him, and then she had carried that silence alone. For 50 years. Ethan closed his eyes briefly. A weight settled over him. Not fear, not shock. Understanding. "She didn't leave," he said quietly. "She stayed with it." Bruno moved closer, pressing lightly against his side, and Ethan rested a hand on his head without looking away. "They came back for this," Ethan said. The realization settled fast. Heavy, clear. "They're not after the money," he added. "They're after him." Above them. A sound. Closer now. Inside the cabin. Ethan's eyes opened instantly. Footsteps. Careful. Moving through the room above. "They're inside," he whispered. Bruno tensed again. Ethan looked down one last time at the buried remains. At the truth Lily had hidden. Then back toward the stairs. "They can't find this," he said. His voice was firm now. Certain. He reached forward and pulled the fabric back over the remains. Covered them. Carefully. Respectfully. Then pushed the box back into place. The dirt followed. Layer by layer, fast. Efficient. The way it had been done before. Bruno watched every movement. Silent. Understanding. When it was done, the wall looked the same again. Unbroken. Hidden. Ethan stood, his breathing steady again. Controlled. He turned toward the stairs. The sound above shifted. Closer. They were searching, piece by piece. Ethan glanced at Bruno. "You ready?" he asked. Bruno met his eyes. Still there. Still strong. Still loyal. Even injured. Ethan nodded once. "Then let's make sure this ends here." Above them, the floor creaked. Right over the hatch, the past had been uncovered, but the present was closing in fast. Ethan didn't hesitate. He moved for the stairs, one hand low, the other guiding Bruno forward. The dog climbed with him, slower now but steady. Every step creaked, but there was no time to worry about noise anymore. Above them, footsteps shifted. On closer. Searching. Ethan reached the top step and paused, listening. Two of them. One near the table, the other moving toward the hallway. "Check under the stairs," a voice said. Ethan's eyes hardened. Too late. He pushed the hatch open in one smooth motion and came up fast, pulling Bruno with him. The first man turned, surprised. That was enough. Ethan moved before the man could react, driving forward, forcing distance, pushing him off balance. The man stumbled back into the table, knocking the letters to the floor. "Where is it?" the man snapped. Ethan didn't answer. The second man stepped into view, slower, more controlled. "Easy," he said. "We don't need to make this worse." Ethan's breathing stayed even. "You already did," he replied. Bruno stood at his side, low and ready, his eyes tracking every movement. The second man glanced down briefly, at the dog, at the blood along his side. "Call him off," he said calmly. Ethan didn't move. The room tightened. No one rushed. No one blinked first. The first man recovered, stepping forward again, anger sharper now. "You don't understand what you're holding," he said. "That doesn't belong to you." Ethan's gaze didn't shift. "It didn't belong to you either," he said. The words landed. The second man's expression changed slightly. Recognition. "You read the letters," he said. Ethan didn't answer. He didn't need to. The silence confirmed it. The man nodded once. "Then you know this isn't about money." Ethan's voice was low. "It never was." The wind pressed against the broken door, rattling the loose wood. The forest outside whispered again, still watching, still waiting. The second man took a step forward, careful, measured. "We're not here for a fight," he said. "We're here to finish something that started a long time ago." Ethan's jaw tightened. "So am I." The tension snapped. The first man moved, fast, too fast. Bruno reacted before Ethan could. The dog lunged, intercepting the movement, forcing the man back, breaking his balance. Ethan stepped in at the same time, redirecting, pushing space, keeping control. Everything blurred into motion. The room felt smaller, tighter, faster. Voices, movement, impact. Ethan didn't think. He acted. Every step placed, every shift controlled, the way it used to be. But this time, he wasn't alone. Bruno stayed with him, even injured, even slowing, still fighting, still protecting. The second man tried to circle. Ethan caught it, moved with him, cut him off. The man stopped, hands raised slightly, not surrendering, calculating. "You don't have to do this," he said. Ethan's voice was steady. "I'm not the one who came back." The man held his gaze. For a moment, something passed between them. Understanding. Then, it was over. The room fell still. The movement stopped. The air settled. Heavy. Quiet. The two men stood back now, no longer pressing forward, no longer pushing. The second man nodded once. "We'll be back," he said. Ethan didn't respond. The man turned. The first one hesitated, then followed. The broken door remained open. The cold air rushed in again, and just like that, they were gone. Ethan didn't move. Not right away. He stood there, listening, counting, 1 minute, then another. Only when the silence held did he exhale. Slow, controlled. Bruno shifted beside him. Ethan looked down. The dog was still standing, still alert. But the strain showed now. Ethan crouched immediately. "Hey," he said quietly. He ran his hand gently along Bruno's side. The wound wasn't deep, but it wasn't nothing either. "You're okay," Ethan said. Bruno didn't pull away. He leaned slightly into the touch. Still present, still steady. Ethan's expression softened. "Good dog," he whispered. For a moment, everything slowed. The fight, the tension, the past catching up. All of it faded just enough to breathe. Ethan sat back on his heels looking around the cabin. The broken door, the scattered letters, the open hatch. Everything exposed. Everything changed. "They'll come back," he said quietly. Well, Bruno didn't react. He didn't need to. They both knew. Ethan stood slowly. His body ached now, not from injury, from everything else. He walked to the table and gathered the letters carefully, stacked them, set them aside. Then he looked toward the hatch, then toward the forest beyond the door. 2 paths again. But this time, he knew which one mattered. He turned back to Bruno. "We're not leaving," he said. The dog met his eyes. No hesitation, no doubt. Ethan nodded once. "Then we finish this." Outside, the wind moved through the trees, soft, endless. But something had changed. Because this time, Ethan wasn't running from it. He was standing his ground. The cabin had gone quiet again. But it wasn't the same quiet. It no longer felt like something hidden. Now it felt resolved. Not finished, but understood. Ethan stood in the center of the room, the cold air moving freely through the broken doorway. The forest beyond it no longer felt like a threat pressing in. It felt like something that had always been there, waiting, watching, and now, letting go. He exhaled slowly and walked to the door, pushing it shut as best he could. The frame was damaged, the wood splintered, but it held enough to keep the wind from cutting straight through. Behind him, Bruno lay down for the first time since it started. Not alert, not tense, just resting. Ethan noticed that immediately. He turned back, studying the dog. "You're finally taking a break," he said quietly. Bruno didn't respond. But he didn't get back up either. That told Ethan everything. The danger had passed, at least for now. Ethan walked back to the table and picked up the notebook again. The pages felt different in his hands. Heavier. Not because of what they said, because of what they meant. He sat down slowly. The chair creaked under him. The sound no longer sharp, no longer unsettling. Just a chair. Just wood. Just a place to sit. He flipped to the last pages, the ones he hadn't read yet. The handwriting had changed again, more uneven, less controlled, like the words had been written under pressure. "I stayed longer than I should have." Ethan's eyes moved across the line. He wanted to leave. I wanted to believe him, but I knew it wouldn't end that way. Ethan leaned back slightly. He could hear her voice now, not the one he remembered as a kid, something older, more tired, more real. "I kept thinking I could fix it, that if I just held on a little longer, it would turn into something else, something safe." Ethan let out a quiet breath. "You always thought that," he murmured. He turned the page. The night it happened, everything was quiet. Too quiet. He said we had time. I believed him. Ethan's jaw tightened. He didn't want to read the next part, but he did. They found us anyway. The words sat heavy on the page. Ethan didn't move. He kept reading. There wasn't time to run. He told me to hide. I didn't listen. Ethan closed his eyes briefly. He could see it now. Not clearly, but enough. The fear, the urgency, the moment everything shifted. I don't know how long it lasted. It felt like seconds. It felt like hours. When it was over, he was gone. Ethan's fingers tightened around the edge of the notebook. All gone, he repeated quietly. He opened his eyes again, kept going. They didn't find me. I don't think they were looking for me. Not yet. I stayed there until morning. Ethan's chest felt heavier now. Not tight, just full. I buried him behind the cabin. I didn't know what else to do. I couldn't leave him there. I couldn't take him with me, so I stayed. Ethan's gaze drifted toward the hatch, toward what he had uncovered. She had done it alone. All of it. No one to help, no one to tell. I thought about coming back, about telling you everything, but every time I tried, I stopped. Ethan swallowed. I didn't want you to carry this. You already carried enough. His eyes softened slightly. You didn't know, he said quietly. You didn't know I would have stayed. He turned the final page, and I stayed away because it was the only way I knew how to keep you safe. Not from them. From me. From what I had become. Ethan sat still. The words settled into the room. Into him, not sharp, not painful, just clear. She hadn't left him. She had protected him, in the only way she knew how. Ethan closed the notebook slowly. He sat there for a long time. The wind moved outside. Soft, endless. But it didn't press against him anymore. It moved past him, around him, like something that no longer needed to reach in. Bruno shifted slightly, letting out a low breath. Ethan looked at him. You knew something was off the second we got here, he said. Bruno's ear twitched. Ethan gave a faint nod. Yeah, he said. You always do. He stood and walked toward the hatch. It was still open, still leading down, and still holding everything she had hidden. Ethan looked down into the darkness, but it didn't feel the same anymore. It didn't feel like something waiting. It felt like something finished. He knelt down and carefully closed the hatch, lowered it into place, pressed the boards back over it, not sealing it, not hiding it, just letting it rest. He stood again and looked around the cabin. The broken door, the scattered pages, the quiet. Everything felt different now. Not lighter, but settled. Ethan walked to the window and looked out toward the trees. For a moment, he thought about all the years, all the distance, all the silence, and how much of it had never really been about him. He rested his hand lightly against the glass. You carried it alone, he said softly. Then, and after a pause, you don't have to anymore. The words didn't echo. They didn't need to. They stayed, right there, in the space between what was and what had been. Bruno stood and walked over, leaning lightly against Ethan's leg. Ethan looked down at him. A small, tired smile touched his face. We're still here, he said. Bruno stayed. That was all the answer he needed. Outside, the forest moved as it always had. But inside the cabin, something had finally come to rest. The quiet didn't feel heavy anymore. It didn't press against Ethan's chest or crawl under his skin the way it had when he first stepped through the door. It settled around him now, like something that had finally found its place. He stood there for a long moment, looking at the room, the broken door, the table, at the scattered letters he had carefully gathered and stacked again. Nothing about the cabin had changed on the outside, but everything about it felt different. Bruno moved slowly across the floor and lay down near the front of the room, close to the door this time, not watching it, not guarding it, just resting. Ethan noticed that. It was the first time since they arrived that Bruno had fully relaxed. "You done worrying?" Ethan asked quietly. Bruno didn't lift his head. Didn't need to. Ethan gave a small nod. "Yeah," he said. "Me too." The next morning came softer. Light moved through the trees in long, pale beams, stretching across the clearing and slipping through the windows without resistance. Ethan stepped outside with a cup of coffee in his hand, the steam rising slowly into the cold air. The forest looked the same, unchanged, but the feeling was gone. No tension, no presence. Just trees, just wind, just distance. He walked out into the clearing, his boots pressing into the ground with a steady rhythm. Behind him, Bruno followed at a slower pace, still favoring his side slightly, but healing, still strong. Ethan stopped near the edge of the property, where the trees opened just enough to let the morning light settle on the ground. He looked out for a long time. Then he turned back toward the cabin. "I think we're staying," he said. Bruno's ears flicked. That was enough. The days that followed moved differently, slower, simpler. Ethan fixed what he could, reinforced the door, cleared the debris, set the cabin back into something that resembled a place to live, not just a place to pass through. Bruno stayed close and always nearby, but no longer tense, no longer watching every shadow. The nights grew quieter, and for the first time in a long while, Ethan slept. Not perfectly, not without interruption, but deeper, longer, without the same weight pressing down on him. One evening, he sat at the table with the notebook open again, not searching this time, just reading, taking it in, piece by piece. He didn't feel anger anymore, or confusion, just understanding. "She did what she thought was right," he said quietly. Bruno lay at his feet, still, present. Ethan rested his hand on the edge of the page. "You carried it alone," he murmured. Then he closed the notebook gently. "That's done now." A week later, Ethan walked out into the clearing with a shovel in his hand. The ground was still cold, but softer now, where the sun reached it. Bruno followed, stopping a few feet away, watching. Ethan chose a spot where the light fell clean and steady through the trees. He pushed the shovel into the earth. One movement at a time. No rush. No urgency. Just steady work. When the hole was deep enough, he set the shovel aside and reached into his pocket. He pulled out a small piece of wood he had carved the night before. Simple, rough, but clear. He placed it into the ground, pressed it in firmly. The name stood there. Lily Cole. He stepped back. The wind moved softly through the branches above, carrying a quiet sound across the clearing. Ethan stood there for a long time, not speaking, not thinking too hard. Just being there. Bruno moved closer and sat beside him. Ethan glanced down. "Feels different," he said. Well, Bruno didn't respond. He didn't need to. Ethan nodded slightly. Yeah, he added. It is. Back inside the cabin, Ethan began writing. Not everything, not the details that didn't need to be shared, but enough. Enough to remember, enough to understand. He wrote about Lily, about the choices she made, about the silence she carried, not as something dark, but as something human, something real. Bruno lay near the door, the afternoon light stretching across his fur. Calm, steady, present. Ethan paused, looking up from the page. For a moment, he listened. The cabin creaked softly. The wind moved outside. The forest breathed the way it always had. Nothing hidden, nothing waiting. Just quiet. Ethan leaned back in his chair. We're not going anywhere, he said. Bruno lifted his head slightly, but then rested it again. That was enough. That night, Ethan stepped out onto the porch. The sky above was clear, filled with stars that stretched endlessly across the dark. He stood there, hands resting lightly on the railing. The cabin behind him felt solid now, grounded. Not a place of secrets, a place of memory, a place that had been waiting to be understood. Bruno joined him, sitting at his side. Ethan glanced down at him. You did good, he said quietly. Bruno's tail moved once against the wood. Ethan smiled faintly. Yeah, he added. You always do. They stood there together, the silence around them no longer empty, just full of everything that had been and everything that remained. Then, Bruno's head lifted, just slightly. His ears shifted toward the tree line. Ethan noticed. His gaze followed, yet the forest stood still, unmoving, unchanged. Ethan watched for a moment, then another. Nothing moved. Nothing stepped forward. Nothing revealed itself. He exhaled slowly. Probably nothing, he said. But Bruno didn't look away right away. He stayed focused. Just a second longer. Then, he relaxed, lowered his head again. Ethan gave a small nod. Yeah, he said softly. Probably nothing. But as he turned back toward the cabin, the trees behind them shifted. Just enough, like something had moved deeper into the dark, not approaching, not watching, just leaving. And this time, Ethan didn't follow. Some stories don't end with answers. They end with understanding. If this story stayed with you, I want to hear from you. Comment 1 if you believe Ethan did the right thing by staying. Or comment 0 if you think some truths should never be uncovered. And tell me, where are you watching from today? Don't forget to subscribe, because there are more quiet, powerful stories waiting. Stories about loyalty, sacrifice, and the things we carry in silence. And the next one might stay with you even longer.